Hello and welcome to Never Mind the Dam Busters, the podcast that delves into the complex, compelling and often controversial history of RAF Bomber Command during the Second World War. I'm Jane Gulliford-Lowes, and with my co-host James Jeffries, we aim to move beyond the headlines, the black and white film portrayals and the familiar legends to uncover the true stories, difficult decisions and moral complexities behind one of the most formidable air forces of the Second World War. In each episode, we explore the operations that defined a generation, the individuals who flew them, the strategies that shaped them, and the innovations that revolutionised aerial warfare. We examine a legacy that remains the subject of debate and reflection even today. Never Mind the Dam Busters is not just a podcast about aircraft and operations. It's about the human dimension, the political context, and the enduring impact of strategic bombing on the modern world. So fasten your seatbelts and join us as we navigate the turbulent skies of history and challenge much of what you think you know about Bomber Command. Now, James is unavailable this week, so I'm flying solo, and I have something a little different for you in this episode. Up until now, we've discussed aircraft types, weapons, strategies, specific operations, crew experiences, and more. But today, we're turning our attention to something equally vital to every airman, regardless of whether he was a tail gunner, a navigator, or flight engineer: his personal flying kit and clothing. Joining me to explore this topic in great depth is Daniel Richards, an RAF living history participant with a long-standing interest in Bomber Command. Like many of us, Daniel's fascination began in childhood through commando comics, classic war films and building airfix models with his dad. He also shares a personal connection to this history. His great-uncle Arthur served as an air gunner with 218 Squadron. Welcome to the show, Daniel.
Hello, good evening. How are you?
Very well, thank you. It's great to have you on board. Thanks very much for joining us this evening. Now, Daniel, I'd like to begin by talking about your involvement in living history before we get down to the details of our subject for discussion tonight. For those of our listeners who aren't familiar with this concept, can you explain what it is and how you got involved?
I think I hit the age of 40 and I had my son, and we was starting to go to a few museums, and we went to one of the air shows at Duxford, and round doing a Battle of Britain display at the time, there was some guys and girls who were in period RAF kit, and I got talking to them, and it was reliving the young child in me, thinking, well, I can sort of maybe go out and find this uniform and find all this equipment. But I think what really sort of struck home with me is, again, taking my son to museums, and we went to the East Kirby Museum, and one of the rooms there was the kit room. And it had all the aircrew sort of personal belongings in, and the beds and all that. And it just sort of really sort of struck home when it's not as cool and as sexy as all the missions and also all the aircraft, but just the actual real personal items that all the crew were wearing. It just sort of really struck something with me. And I think myself, as I've got hundreds of books like we all have from Bomber Command, but being a bit more of a visual learner, to actually being able to put the kit on and sort of slightly, if it's just sort of 1% maybe experiencing what the crews felt, maybe sort of putting the kit on, climbing inside a Lancaster and just thinking, wow, this is really uncomfortable trying to walk up and down this, and this is just when it's on the ground. And it just gave me maybe a little bit a better understanding for myself to hopefully take on board what the guys were going through.
Yeah, that just gives you a completely different perspective, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah, very much so. It just say things with the uniform on, and if you've got the parachute harness on, you think trying to walk through the Lancaster, getting it caught, and the clothes when it's so itchy and uncomfortable, and big heavy boots. You think trying to walk up and down it and climb through it when it's on the ground, but trying to, if it's out of control or if when it's in flight, you just think it's just so difficult.
Yeah, it's scary, isn't it? The first time I went inside an RAF bomber, it was inside the Halifax reconstruction that they've got at the Yorkshire Air Museum. And the first thing that I thought was how enormous it was on the outside, and yet how congested and claustrophobic it was in the inside. And I'm quite a small person, and the thought of sort of having to clamber around sort of in full kit, you know, be sat there or stood there, whatever, for 8 hours and being fired at, possibly, you know, developing technical problems, possibly being on fire, then the aircraft going out of control or whatever. It must have been absolutely horrific. There's just no other way to put it, I don't know. Right, we're going to move on to the main subject of our discussion today, and that's aircrew kit. Now, I'm very lucky to have in my possession a copy of my great-uncle's clothing card. issued to him when he began aircrew training in 1942, and which itemises every piece of clothing and equipment which was issued to him during the course of the war. I'll post a link to the card in the show notes and on social media so you can all have a look and follow along with this conversation. At this point in time, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Dr. Dan Ellin and the team at the IBCC, that's the International Bomber Command Centre, Digital Archive. Thanks to them, Jack's papers, photographs and logbook are now all available for people to look at. So, Daniel, Jack's kit was issued to him in late 42 and then sort of onwards from early 43 when he went operational, when he joined 10 Squadron in May 43. So what kit could a Bomber Command airman expect to be issued at this point in the war? And sort of how had that evolved since 1939? And indeed, how did it continue to evolve? Had it changed much by the end of the war? I can appreciate that's like a thesis-long question there, but do your best.
Yeah, I mean, to think, obviously, during the war with men and women, there was over 1 million people in the RAF with obviously taking on different roles, and they all needed to be clothed. So the uniform initially, say at the start, you see, I think it's a topic where you sort of need maybe a visual reference with things, and I sort of think probably the easiest for me, maybe for people listening, is to go to a couple of films, because I think that straight away it fits in everybody's mind, where you can sort of then picture the uniforms, picture what people are wearing. But to start with, you'd see a lot of the officers will be wearing a service dress, general purpose. So obviously to start with, if you had your service dress, you would then maybe add 2 service dresses, just to say one that you was maybe flying in, or you might be having a flight suit to fly in, which then goes on to the battle dress. So the battle dress was just a copy really of the army battle dress, but obviously in the RAF colours. That was worn by all aircrew, no matter whatever rank throughout. Made of serge fabric, very itchy, not very comfortable to wear. Same with the trousers, but very quick to, cheap and easy to make, given to all aircrew and everyone in the RAF.
What about the actual kit for flying then? What could an airman who's just got his wings and just joined his operational squadron, what sort of gear would he be issued with?
So again, the kit develops a lot from the early war. What I find just amazing is the amount of kit that each different aircrew member was actually taking on. I think when you think of a Halifax or a Lancaster that's fully, it's fueled up, it's got all its full bomb load on, but the actual what the guys are carrying onto the plane as well was quite phenomenal, really. Just the actual weight of it. With say if you have someone, say like a navigator who's got all his maps and all his plotting equipment, all that as well, it's it was a lot to carry on. But yeah, we'd start with your sort of basics really. So I suppose your sort of basic starting point would be the observer harness. Now that clips around your body, has a big buckle at the front, which you can just press and then it would all pop off. But on that you have two clips sort of around sort of chest height. So on them 2 clips would be where your parachute would go. So your parachute would be clipped onto that. It would hopefully, say if you were right-handed, to pull your parachute would be on the right side. If you were left-handed, it was maybe a little bit more awkward because you're trying to find that you're sort of coming across your body to pull that. So yeah, so that would clip on. You'd obviously have to make sure that it clips on at the right. You've clipped it on the right way up.
Yes, that would.
Yes, when you was issued with your parachute, you was given a parachute bag to put in. A lot of aircrew you do see walking around the airbase with these, because it was a good thing just for putting equipment in. So say other bits and pieces you could put in, say maybe little mascots or your flying gloves, flying helmets, that sort of thing. It was a good thing for carrying around equipment. So once you've got your parachute and your observer harness, you would go and sign out. So you go to the stores. You would also probably fill out a little form. Being very British, you'd have to sort of fill that out, and then you would be given your parachute, which you would be expected to return when you hopefully returned.
Okay.
So we go with parachute. Your next bit of equipment would be your C-type flying helmet. Now this is, again, so when he's sort of talking a bit more of a visual reference, if the easiest one would be if we're thinking Richard Todd in the Dam Busters. So when he's on the mission, and you see him communicating with all the other aircraft. That is the C-type flying helmet.
Okay, right. And these were issued to every man in the crew. They would have all had the same.
Yes, they all wear the same one. And say what attaches to the flying helmet. So initially you had a D mask. So if you see sort of pilots in the Battle of Britain, they had these D masks. Now I think what they found with the early part of the war was a lot of the oxygen that goes through there was escaping. The hoses would freeze over time. So what was developed throughout the war to go on this was the E-type oxygen mask. Now this was something that's not really changed that much even up to now with pilots. This was designed so it would fit around your mouth a lot better. It has the speaker inside there as well, so you can obviously communicate with the base, communicate with the rest of the crew. And it was a tighter fit around your mouth, so less oxygen was lost. So obviously when you're at sort of 30,000 feet, 40,000 feet, it's a crucial bit of kit.
Yeah. One thing I was going to ask about was the flying suits. For those of you who can access the International Bomber Command's digital archive, you'll see a lovely photograph there of Jack and in his flying suit. Now, I'm right in thinking that these were, I don't know whether they were heated at the beginning, but they were certainly, by the time Jack was flying operationally from May 43, these suits were heated. Is that right?
Yes, you see, again, it was another development. So that the sort of flying suits were a pre-war design. Yeah, for the electric. I mean, the electric suits were very early in the war, but they were very unreliable.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the time you see here that aircrew was getting electric shocks, or they plug them in, and you might just get one fire that might warm up and not the rest of the body. I think again, even later in the war, no, they were a bit more user friendly. They were still probably not that reliable, and I think probably the easiest thing for most crew was to put on as many layers as possible to try and keep yourself warm.
So how did these flying suits actually work? Did you sort of like plug them into something when you got on board, or how did the heating element actually work?
Referring back to my Royal Air Force, the Hendon Osprey book, which has been a really good source. And so from January 1942, the electric heated clothing type D was announced. This was designed for the use of a wide pattern suit and a tailored suit. All of its electrical connections were achieved by means of a press stud terminals and gloves and sockets worn inside ordinary gauntlets or boots. The amount of heat could be varied by wearing or discarding certain components of the set, so that hands and feet could be catered for by clipping gloves and socks on the outer suit torso. So I think what would happen, it was sort of an inner, it was under all your flying clothing. So certain bits would heat up, and yeah, depending where you were on the plane, it would be how much of it you would put on.
Yeah, I've read accounts of people being burnt, of people being electrocuted, these suits not working at all. But as you say, I think they were extremely unreliable, but perhaps the best that could be made available at the time and the circumstances. So
yes, you do hear a lot with.
Oh, go on.
No, I mean, yeah, you do read a lot of accounts of crews getting electrocuted, and it just with everything else to deal with, just a bit of equipment that you do want to rely on, and then it's faulty instantly. And I think you see a lot of the crews were just wearing them because it was another layer. I think they weren't necessarily thinking they were that reliable to actually plug in, but I think it just because maybe it was a bit tighter to the skin, it was a good bit of equipment to use.
Yeah, right. Okay, so we'll have a look at Jack's clothing card now. To people who are listening and who haven't accessed the link, this is a tiny little piece of a card, a tiny little card booklet consisting of 10 pages. It's about this, probably a bit bigger than the size of a cigarette packet, perhaps, and it's date issued 16th of August 1942. And no one else knows this, but if you smell this card, it still smells of Jack's Players Navy Cut cigarettes, which I think is lovely. A lovely link to the past. Anyway, the amount of kit that Jack's actually been issued over the course, well, when he qualified for aircrew training in the middle of 42, August 42, is absolutely enormous. There's just pages and pages of this stuff. All sorts of stuff that I've got no idea what it actually is, but I love the terminology that's used, like, where are we? Yeah. Helmets, flying, type B, without mask, oxygen. Yeah. Then we've got receiver, telephone, head, type C, all this kind of thing. So yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, a real insight. And one of the things which I'll just mention before we actually start going through the card is that on the back there's a list of special instructions for use in war. And item 4 of those instructions states, articles lost on active service through the exigencies of the campaign or whilst actually flying or destroyed in a flying accident will be replaced free, it's very magnanimous of them, provided that a certificate signed by the officer commanding the unit in which the loss or damage occurred is produced. That's just like the perfect example of British RAF bureaucracy, isn't it? It's crazy. Anyway, right, so we'll have a look at the what's on the list then, Daniel. Do you want to sort of take us through there, some of the main items?
Yes, I mean, so some of the examples of the flying clothing kit that I've seen is a Form 667B. I've not seen there was a Form 667A, but maybe there is, or I can't find examples of a 6C. So maybe that was just the standard one. So on the front, you obviously put your name and your rank, and then it gives you the date issued. So it's everything on that card that was when you were issued it and when you returned it, hopefully, was the aim. So yeah, you start with, so looking at page 1, you've got your flying boots. So with regards flying boots, we would look at, so probably the most standard one would be like the 1940 pattern flying boots. Now these are all fur lined inside, obviously to keep your feet warm. Now it says below that it says socks, so we're looking at the big woolen sort of navy socks, which
which is a bit plain, isn't it?
1p, yes. So you obviously need to be good or know somebody that's good at sewing so you can repair them and keep them going. But they are white as well, so but not the best of colours when you are in a job that they're going to get very mucky very quickly. But yeah, having worn flying boots on a summer's day and the socks, they're not the most comfortable things to be walking around with, and you do end up with very, very sweaty feet. But they are obviously there for a purpose. With flying boots, they did have escape boots, which I think were about 1943. Come on to use. So they were a sort of standard shoe at the bottom with a fur lined, I think it's maybe suede a little bit higher up. So they were issued with a knife. So if you did crash, you could cut off the top part of the boot, and then you would just look like you had a normal pair of shoes. Yeah. If you was walking around in flying boots, it was not the best. So yeah, if you you could cut the top off. So you can still buy original pairs of these. If you're very lucky to get them, probably we're talking maybe £400 or £500. The knives that come with them are incredibly rare. But yeah, the most sort of standard boots, say with the sort of 1940 pattern flying boots, all fur lined. We go on to there where we're talking about, it says caps flying, so I assume there it's obviously talking about the C-type flying helmet. With the C-type flying helmet, so it talks about earpieces type B. So obviously with inside there you've got your speakers inside your flying helmet, so they would be connected via the hoses, which you could obviously you'd plug into whatever section of the aircraft you're into, could communicate with the rest of the aircraft. Very important is you have your flying gauntlets. Now it says, again, seems a very British thing that says on the card, because it's got gauntlets flying left hand, and then below it says right hand. So maybe if you just wanted one, you could. So left and right handed. Now again, with the things like the gloves, they changed again. So originally you had the original flying gloves were like 1933 gloves. Now they had the zip that was probably what you would think of a bit of a standard glove that would be on the side, but so the 1941 flying gloves, which are the most sort of common that we used after that, so they had a zip that would go a bit more across. I think it was probably easier to do them up and undo them. Below them you could have silk gloves, and then obviously a lot of aircrew would wear other gloves underneath the flying gauntlets as well to keep their hands warm, which I think it does say on the clothing card. It says about lining gauntlets and silk gloves, depending what your choice was.
If we move on to page 2, though, then we've got the more interesting stuff. We've got goggles.
Yes, so flying goggles, again, flying goggles changed a lot throughout the war. Probably the most common ones you'd be looking at this sort of mid to late war period be either the Mark 7 or the Mark 8 goggles. Again, as a reference, it is, if you're thinking Richard Todd in the Dan Busters film, the goggles that he's wearing in that. It's one of those where you sort of, I don't know, you sort of need a visual thing to, so you can think of Richard Todd, so with the C-type helmet on, he's got the G mask on, he's got I think he's got Mark 7 goggles on at the time. So glasses tinted, so it's basically a pair of sunglasses really, if he was on maybe daylight operations, or if he was maybe of a medium bomber, just to aid with that. We talk about spectacles, anti-glare spectacles as well. They did have, and I don't think it's listed on here, but there was night vision binoculars that were used. I've seen some aircrew with those. Yeah. They're very rudimentary for the time, but yeah, they did have. I think it was a lot with sort of tail gunners. I don't know if it's a Canadian thing, because I've seen a few Canadian air gunners that seem to be using these. But again, they are another item that still exists. You can still buy these if you look in the right places. But yeah, they had sort of night vision goggles. How good they were, how reliable they were, I'm not sure. On the clothing card, it talks about, say, with the flying helmet. So again, we're talking about the C-type helmet with the G mask. It's got your oxygen in. It's got a receiver in, microphone, so you can talk to the rest of the crew.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the items on there, which is quite interesting at the bottom of page 2, is it says a pistol revolver.
Yeah. Now, it doesn't look like Jack was actually issued, because when you look in the next column, it says quantity issued, and there's nothing there. But when you turn over the page, there is one issued, but I can't make out the date like that. But it looks like 27th of June. It looks like 45. But why on earth would you have been issued with a pistol in June 1945? That can't be right.
I think from what I gather, his pistols and revolvers were offered to all aircrew, but I think a lot of aircrew decided it was probably not the best item to have if you were shot down, to be in Germany with a pistol with a few maybe trigger happy soldiers, and I think it was probably not the best item.
And also it says rods cleaning. So not only do you get the pistol, you get the kit to clean it with as well. So that's interesting.
I think reading accounts, I think the pistols were popular with maybe certain aircrew, because around the base they were quite good for shooting rabbits and things for extra food.
That's probably more like it, to be honest.
So that's what I sort of think. So I know they were issued and thought that they were going to be taken on missions. They were more used around the airfield for, like I say, for food.
Yeah, I can just imagine that.
Yes.
If you go on to page 4, when you are January 43, so this is just after they've just crewed up and they're moving on to their training, probably at the from the OTU, they're moving to the HCU, the Heavy Conversion Unit, to do their training on actual big proper bombers, 4-engine bombers. And these got things like jerseys, white, vests, white, blouse, other... What's that say? Suits. Can't even read that. Oh, buoyancy suit. Yeah, another kind of buoyancy suit. Yeah. This particular bit, which I like, which you know that they really mean business now, is torch 1, bells 2, whistles 1. Now, we've actually got a photograph again, which I'll post on our social media, of Jack's crew at the end of their tour, their index photograph. And all of the lads are wearing their blue battle dress kind of thing. But most of the lads have still got their whistles attached to their collars. So that's that very whistle that's mentioned in that thing. So this is presumably for what, attracting attention if you ditch or something like that?
Whistle was attached to the sort of the top collar of your battle dress, and yeah, the idea is it's basically just for if you're in the sea or anywhere, it's just blow the whistle. It was made, I believe, by a company that I think called Acme, famous from is it Looney Tunes or something? But yeah, I mean that would be one of the items. Yeah, so if you did come down in the sea, but there was a huge amount of kit that was taken on board just if you did have to go down in the sea. So your most common item would be your Mae West.
Yeah.
The Mae West life jacket. Mae West life jacket, obviously named after a famous actress. Now, at the beginning, I'd probably say the Battle of Britain time, if you was in Bomber Command, you would maybe be issued, say, an internal harness. So this was had a like a life jacket and a parachute all in one. But probably the most common one they found would be the 1941 pattern Mae West. Now this was more sort of a yellow in colour, so it was a bit, say, if you were trying to be spotted in the sea, it was a little bit easier. Now it had lots of different pockets on it for various different bits of equipment, so you could have obviously maybe another whistle that could be attached to that. Inside it has a bladder which you could use a little oxygen bottle just to pump up to obviously keep you afloat. If for any reason the bottle wasn't working, you had a valve where you could blow it up. Other things on there, so you'd have a dye would be on there. You'd have a little, I think it's maybe a little bit more later in the war, you'd have a light on there, so if you wanted to just attract attention, you could use that.
Mm-hmm. Now, I've just realised something. So he's issued with this buoyancy suit, his torch, his whistle. All this is issued on the 8th of March 1943. And this is when he and his crew were sent from their training unit, and they were sent on secondment for about a month to Coastal Command. Now, I know this was extremely unusual at the time, but I've actually found something in the documentation at the National Archives. Because Coastal Command was so short of aircrew and aircraft at this particular time, they were actually borrowing crews on a temporary basis from the OTUs, the operational training units. And so this exactly coincides, all this sort of sea-related stuff, so buoyancy suits, etc., with that secondment. So that explains why they were issued with that. Then the next date in the clothing card is 17th of May, and that was the day after the crew joined their operational squadron at 10 Squadron. So this is when we seriously get down to business and they're getting all the stuff that they need to be able to fly operationally. So Jack is a wireless operator, and I note that some of the stuff on the card there says it's got socket adapter, what looks like tubing, receiver something, other bits and pieces that seem to be sort of wireless related, shall we say. So we talked a little bit about the sort of stuff that they might have had to use on their Coastal Command operations, but what about survival kit generally that was issued to crews on bombers?
So yeah, again, they would be issued with a raft case. So this should be a couple of rafts maybe for a couple of aircrew to get in, but a big enough dinghy for the whole aircrew to get in if they did go down. So you've got things in there, say like first aid kits, you've got some rations in there, emergency flying rations, you've got maybe some very hard chocolate to use, you've got some dinghys, and a really, really important bit of kit would be the Gibson Girl radio.
Right.
So this come with a kite basically, which you could put up to get a signal, and it was a wind-up radio that hopefully you could send out a message of your location for the air sea rescue to come and pick you up, or hopefully somebody else would spot you to make it a bit easier to come and pick you up in the sea. So yeah, basic ration packs, obviously things for pouring out water. You can have also things for like a mirror for shining for help you with signalling. So you'd be issued with plugs just in case you did get a hole in the dinghy. You'd be able to hopefully plug it.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't think of any of this stuff sort of in association with Bomber Command operations, but the amount of stuff that they had to take and have on board, it's just unbelievable, isn't it?
Yes, that's surprising. I mean, so there's a great few books to say that do have all the equipment in, but yeah, as I say, it's amazing that you managed to get Halifax up in there with a full bomb load and a full petrol, and then all the crew carrying all the equipment as well. It's staggering.
It's absolutely mad, isn't it? And of course, one thing that my uncle's crew had on board their Halifax at this particular time as well, to aid with their rescue, should they end up ditching or get shot down, whatever, was 2 pigeons. Lots of people don't know about the pigeons on bombers, but they were very much a real thing. And Jack, as the wireless operator, was in charge of the pigeons on board. So how you were meant to write down your coordinates, tuck them into the pigeon's collar, dispatch the pigeon out of the aircraft, all while you plummeting to the ground at like 250 miles an hour. I've got no idea, but that's what you were supposed to do with pigeons. But there are actual...
It's just another thing to carry onto the plane as well. It's just to say with all your kit and bags and parachutes and this, and then to carry the pigeon on as well.
Yeah, there are actually recorded instances of crews being rescued via pigeon, though, who sort of ditched in the North Sea or whatever. So it did work. Can't have been that many of them, but it did actually work. So that's something. They obviously thought it was worthwhile, otherwise they wouldn't do it. But yeah.
Yeah, I think they had them throughout the war. Really, I think it wasn't just from one period. It does seem throughout the war.
Yeah, Jack's tail gunner Bill told me about the pigeons, because otherwise I wouldn't have believed it. But when you actually go and have a look at the Halifax at the Yorkshire Air Museum, the one I alluded to earlier, they do actually have two. I think, well, there must be plastic, they're not stuffed pigeons in the basket, in just sort of behind where the flight engineer would stand. So yeah, they're very much a real thing. Anyway, that's enough about pigeons. One thing which I think you will perhaps be more familiar with from watching films or go to museums or whatever is the escape kit that the crews were issued with. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, please, Daniel?
So yeah, with escape kits, so I basically think that was just maybe on the uniform. That so with a battle dress, which is some with standard black buttons, but the crew would have changed to maybe say with brass buttons, and inside the brass button you would have a little compass, which was yeah, essential. You see a lot of aircrew with scarves on, and a lot of scarves could maybe say with that you'd have scarves that could have maps on. You could find they were issued with currency. So depending maybe where you're going, so say just in case you did get shot down, you would have issued with some francs, just in case you would need them. There was, again, maybe a handkerchief that would come with some useful phrases. In case you were shot down in France or in Germany, you might meet somebody who was hopefully sympathetic towards you, or might sort of be able to help you.
What about sort of rations? Would there be some survival rations or anything like that?
Just as part of your basic flight kit, so you was issued with Air Ministry rations, some cardboard sweets, and some chocolate, which you hear a lot of stories of aircrew that the chocolate was just basically like just a block of ice, and you would just suck on the chocolate for hours, and it would never melt the entire time they was on the mission. But yeah, it's just things, let's say, with escape maps, say the silk maps, depending on what area maybe you was flying in, the compasses. Again, it's a equipment that there's possibly, unless you can actually put it on you in your pockets, is if it's in a box or in another bag, it's another thing to carry on to into.
Yeah, I think that's when you watch the old films, you always see them, getting out the truck on the airfield or whatever, and they've all got like loads of stuff that they're carrying with them, haven't they? Like big sort of boxes or what look like cases of stuff and things around their necks, and obviously their Mae Wests and everything, like parachutes and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, the amount of kit that they're having to take up with them every time. And what amazes me as well is that none of this kit was lost, bearing in mind that Jack completed a full tour and had some extremely hairy moments indeed. All of his kit was returned on, looks like the 1st of May 1946, when he was demobbed. But yeah, there's one thing I wanted to mention, which was just on page 5 of the card. And this is stuff that is issued 20th of July 1945. So this is after the war's ended. Jack is given a parachute, is given a new harness, is given a parachute bag, is given a Mae West. He's being given a dinghy, a leash, which is presumably for said dinghy, and a microphone. So this is all in July and August 1945. I've got absolutely no idea. I'll have to go back and check his service record and his logbook and see what he was doing then. I know that he was doing a little bit of air-sea sweeps and stuff. Air-sea. I mean, they wouldn't be doing rescues, obviously, at that point in stage, presumably just patrols. But he was also doing a bit of stuff for Ferry Command, because they were transporting planes around the country. Eventually for disposal, I guess. He was constantly flying Lancasters up and down to Cornwall, I think, the southwest of England. He was at St. Evil for a while. He did absolutely all sorts of different jobs throughout the course of the war. So after he completed his tour, he was very lucky he didn't get called back for a second one. He was sent off to be an instructor at RAF Kinloss up in Scotland, and he was there, sat out the rest of the war up there, nicely and safely out of the way. Thought, luckily for him.
I think it's the thing to think with the kit, of the amount of surplus kit that they must have had at the end of the war.
Yeah.
Because I assume it was obviously continuously made and continuously produced throughout the war. So things like the canvas parachute bag, which would have been a great item to have take at the end of the war, just as a bag for going on holiday with or stuff, because it's a good sized bag. And as I say, a lot of aircrew didn't put their parachutes in there because, again, if you crashing or you're being shot down, to then have to unzip another bag to get your parachute out, it was just easier just to hook your parachute on somewhere that was more convenient than having to get it out of another bag.
All that stuff I've just all that stuff I just mentioned was handed back on the 26th of September 45. So that more or less fits in with what I've just said about where he was and what he was doing. And the rest of the stuff went back 1st of May 46 when he was demobbed. Yeah, but I mean, when you think about the cost, the financial cost, the resources which must have gone into manufacturing all of this equipment for all of these airmen. So what you got? 120,000 airmen going through Bomber Command, bit more maybe, all of them having this kit. And obviously some kit gets lost, some kit gets replaced. So much kit will have been destroyed on operations, obviously, for the lads who was shot down and who didn't come back. It's sort of stuff and equipment. It's just
a battle dress. If you think there was over 1 million personnel in the RAF, I mean, just the battle dress, there's a lot of work just goes into that. But something that's a bit more, say, like observer parachute harness, there's a lot of work that goes in that. I'd be interested to find out what the actual cost per item was.
Yeah.
For each one, but just the actual, even things, say, like a first aid pack or just tins of sweets and things like that. So that how much stuff was produced was just unbelievable.
Somebody somewhere must have been making a lot of money out of the war, that's for sure.
Yes, probably forgotten one of the most famous items is probably about the Irving flying jacket.
Oh yeah,
which is the big padded leather jacket, so with a nice bowline collar. So you see most aircrew wearing these. Something that I did find, again, I'd have to thank the IBCC for. This was the tale of a air gunner. It's a day in the life of an air gunner, and it gets to a little bit I found was quite interesting to read. It says our night flying meal: bacon, sausage, egg, baked beans, chips, all washed down with a pint of milk. At 6:30 hours, we assembled in the locker room, and the ritual of dressing up begins. So then he goes through what his ritual is before he gets on the aircraft. So he's stripping down to my shreddies. I don a pair of my girlfriend's discarded silk stockings, then aircrew issue silk wool long johns, a pair of everyday socks, followed by my electric socks. Next came my electric suit, pressing in the sock connectors. Then shirt, battle dress trousers, sea boot stockings, and trousers tucked into my fleece-lined flying boots, long thick aircrew sweater, and battle dress to do. All this before taking into consideration the Mae West life jacket and the parachute.
God grief. Yeah. Love the bit about the stockings. That's great.
Yes, yeah. For the poor girlfriend who's lost a pair of stockings that was a precious gift to her that she's now lost. I remember when they had the opening of the IBCC, and I was talking to one of the veterans, and he told me a story about to get in the tail gunner into the rear turret, and he said it took two of them to push him in. He had so many layers of clothing on, and they had to say literally just push him into the rear turret. And then I said to him, well, what would happen if he got shot down? I said, how would he get out? And he said, oh, he wouldn't, but he was warm.
Well, always a bonus. Yeah, I remember.
Always a bonus. Yeah.
We're talking to Bill and him saying that these electrics never used to work, and quite often they used to tap out a bit of the perspex glass in these rear gun turrets. It gave you a better field of vision, if you like. And he said it was so cold that the sweat and the saliva would run down your chin, and you would end up with icicles basically hanging off the end of your chin. By the end of your trip, you'd be that cold. It was just unbelievable. You just can't even imagine.
It seems like, so like they're sort of, no, you can't, when it's sort of minus 40 degrees temperature. Like say, if you're a tail gunner, and the fact that little bit of perspex you have, it's actually considered better to remove it so you can actually see clearer. So that little bit of protection you have got from the outside is like, well, no, actually you don't need that. We'll take that away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's all a bit scary, isn't it? Yeah. Right. Do you want to go back onto the living history point now, Daniel, before we wrap up?
it's really good just to say to get onto the aircraft and be able to sort of touch and feel it as if you're actually in the equipment. But I think, like I say, with the group I'm in, we're mainly sort of Lincolnshire based, and we do a lot of events. So we do like the East Kirkby Air Show and events there, but we go to a lot of the little museums that you have around Lincolnshire, and it's things like the Wings Museum that we have down in Surrey. We normally have a few tables. We put our equipment on there, and what's really important, so for us, is telling the story. So when we get children that come over and they want to maybe try on a flying helmet, or they want to try on a battle dress, or put on the parachute harness, things like that. It's just to say, yeah, you've put this on. Imagine wearing that for 8 hours, and you're up at a Lancaster or in a Halifax doing that. So for us, it's really important to say is to share the experiences as best as we can, or what we and imagine what they are, but trying to share them with other people. And what I really love with Living History is that it's just the amount of people that you meet, and so and so will come and go. Oh no, well my dad was in Bomber Command and he did this and this, or my uncle, and you just get their stories as well. A lot of the stories they say is the same thing. Oh well, my dad, he never talked about it, but I've got his medals, or I've got some pictures of him, and I know he flew on Lancasters, or I think he flew on Halifaxes, and it's really good that we can have the link. I mean, most of the guys and girls that are in our group they had dads or uncles or grandparents that were in Bomber Command. So I know we're not bomber boys and bomber girls, but we hope that we can just try and educate people and try and keep the stories going, which is really important. So just for the items and the collections that we have and we display at the shows and the museums, it's hopefully just a little bit to keep the stories going.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're doing an absolutely brilliant job. That was fantastic, Daniel. Really, really interesting, and a completely different perspective on the sort of thing that we usually talk about. But again, very, very crucial, because, without this kit, there could be no Bomber Command. I think people shouldn't forget that. All of these tiny little pieces in the jigsaw all add up to make the greater whole, don't they? It's like crew positions. People say, oh, no, who was the most important person in the crew? Well, all of them, because you couldn't have a bomber crew without any one of them. It just wouldn't work.
I think a lot of the pilots they were just the bus driver, and everyone else was telling him what to do, and it's you hear that a lot. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you very much indeed, Daniel. That was great. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. Your support is hugely appreciated. We're going to be doing another question and answer show shortly, so please do send in your questions. You can contact us on our social media channels by email or via the link in the show notes. If you're enjoying the show, why not help us spread the word? A quick star rating or review on your favourite podcast platform goes a long way. It helps more curious minds like yours discover Nevermind the Dam Busters. It really makes a massive difference to those algorithms. And if you'd like to go one step further, you can support the show for just £2.40 or $3 a month. It's a small contribution that makes a big difference. Just hit the link in the show notes or head over to nevermindthedambusters.budsprout.com. We'd also love to hear from you. Join the discussion in our Facebook group and follow us on social media to stay in the loop. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back again next week with more stories from above. Until then, take care and goodbye.